How is the international community responding to the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Pakistan? And what level of foreign assistance can the government hope to get here at the United Nations as it attempts to strike the right balance in its geopolitical relations? Joining me now on the margins of the 77th UN General Assembly is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Foreign Minister Bhutto Zardari, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are attending your first General Assembly as Minister of Foreign Affairs just weeks after the country was flooded by devastating rains. A third of Pakistan submerged. In addition to the tragic loss of life, economic losses of up to $30 billion and counting. What international assistance did you seek and what did you get while you were here at the United Nations? I imagine this is the first item on the agenda.
This is absolutely our only agenda item. I mean, as you mentioned, Pakistan is going through a climate catastrophe of biblical apocalyptic proportions. We've all heard the story of Noah's floods, that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Well, our monster monsoons started in mid-June and ended at the end of August. And when the rains finally stopped, a 100-kilometer lake formed in the middle of my country that could be seen from space. We, as you mentioned, a third of the country's landmass is underwater, and 1 in 7 of my population, 33 million people, bigger than the population of New York State, Sri Lanka, many other countries, dire need of assistance.
And yet, is the world coming to Pakistan's assistance? And by that I mean, are wealthy Western donors doing enough to help?
Look, absolutely, the world is stepping up and assisting Pakistan. And we're incredibly grateful for all the countries that have come to our assistance, particularly to the UN Secretary General, who visited Pakistan immediately during the flooding and has come to the United Nations and made this a cornerstone of this session. He mentioned Pakistan and the floods, I think, 3 times in his speech. We've had a UN flash appeal, and going forward, once the damage needs assessment is done, we will be holding a conference. But my message really to the world is that we don't want to seek aid. We want justice for our people, because I don't know if you're aware, but Pakistan's carbon footprint, or our carbon output, is about 0.8%. That's less than 1%. And we're amongst the 10 most climate-stressed countries on the planet. That's incredibly unfair, that these 33 million people of Pakistan are literally paying with their lives and their livelihoods for the industrialization and greenhouse gases of rich countries.
But before we talk about the effect of climate change, let me just pick on what you said about the Secretary General and the fact that you believe that the Western world has come to your aid. The SG himself has said that the world was sleepwalking through this tragedy, through these floods. He did visit Pakistan, yes, but then if we haven't seen the kind of aid that matches the scale of this tragedy, his visit could not have been that successful, was it?
It's absolutely successful in not only garnering the attention, and the attention is what we need before we can get the aid. And as far as officially gathering the aid is concerned, while it has come in bits and pieces as of now, once our waters finally recede, because it's going to take many months for the waters to pass, and the damage needs assessment is done, then we will have a proper figure, a comprehensive dossier, which the United Nations Secretary General himself and other world leaders, including President Macron of France, have offered to assist us and support us, not only for the relief and rescue, but going forward for reconstruction and rehabilitation. The problem is the scale. The scale of this tragedy is so immense that despite the fact that we have received aid, and quite a bit of aid, it's all a drop in the ocean when it comes to the sheer scale of the tragedy.
And you blame much of it on climate change, do you?
It's not me. I mean, the scientists are saying that this storm was 50% worse as a result of climate change.
But monsoon rains, though, in Asia are not a new phenomenon.
No, absolutely.
Some believe that the government should have been better prepared. In fact, a lot of scientists also believe that blaming it all on the doorsteps of climate change is misleading, because they say the government has also mismanaged the crisis.
I'd really love for you to name the scientist that says that. Frankly, we're used to floods. We're used to monsoons. This was nothing normal. We've had historic floods, the biggest in our history, in 2011, in 2010. But what do you do when 100-kilometer lake forms in the middle of your country? What do you do when flooding comes from the skies? So there's no way that the government could feel this body of water is still descending towards my ocean. I challenge any country, the most powerful countries on earth. I challenge America that if a 100-kilometer lake formed here in New York and suddenly the entire population of New York was homeless, hungry, in need of medicine, would the strongest, most powerful, richest country on earth afford to feed them immediately, house them immediately? So the problem is that those that are suffering as a result of these cataclysmic climate events, sure, are not prepared for such a scale of the disaster, but they're also not the ones who contributed to it, who caused it.
It is on a different level, and no one is arguing with this point. 90% of crops in Sindh province, which is considered the breadbasket of Pakistan, have been damaged. And next year's crops, you might expect, would also be compromised. Do you foresee a doomsday scenario where some local officials are saying those who won't die from the floods may die as a result of starvation?
So this is an absolutely compounding catastrophe, because we're still in the rescue and relief phase, because as I mentioned, this water is descending to the oceans, and then going forward, because of the stagnant water and the sheer scale of it, there's the potential of an epidemic of waterborne diseases. So we've got a climate catastrophe, a health catastrophe, as you mentioned, the crops of 4 million acres of standing crop destroyed, and the coming crop is wheat, and if we miss that, which is what it's looking like, that means a serious food security issue. And to top it all off, we just entered into the IMF agreement after very difficult negotiations, and we were looking forward to a sigh of economic relief. But unfortunately, all the estimates, all the figures, all the numbers that deal is based on is also washed away from the floods. So on top of all of this, we're potentially staring at incredibly difficult economic times.
And you mentioned that what Pakistan needs isn't aid. It's something more fundamental. But can Pakistan withstand the threats of a looming famine and the impacts of climate change all at once and all on its own?
That's absolutely, I think what you mentioned there is absolutely right, all on its own. That's something we can't do. It's a global, this sort of catastrophe is a result of global actions, and its solution has to be global as well.